Joel Embiid and the Sixers dominated LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and the Lakers. What does it mean for both teams? Plus, upset central as the Blazers and Jazz knock off two teams with playoff hopes. Plus, the in-season tournament wraps up on Tuesday night, and there's a lot of ways this could shake out. We'll try and break it down for you here on Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On NBA, your daily source for all things NBA from the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for joining us and making us your first listen. Appreciate you guys being in every day or checking us out all 5 days a week with all of our different hosts. You can catch John Corrales and Jake Madison tomorrow on Wednesday. You got Pat the Designer and Nick Angstadt on Thursdays. And on Fridays, you got Wes Goldberg and Adam Mares, two guys that we know quite a bit. And that's to say that I'm Matt Moore. I am co-host of Locked On Nuggets and senior NBA writer for the Action Network, joined by David Ramil. He's co-host of Locked On Heat, and we're going to talk all things NBA tonight for you. We'll talk about the Sixers dominating LeBron James and the Lakers. We'll get to the Jazz and the Blazers pulling off some interesting upsets against teams with some playoff hopes that are still trying to work their way through things. And then the final segment, tomorrow's the last day of the in-season tournament. We'll try and break down all the different scenarios. There's no way we're going to be able to do that. We will try and sum up the important things for you to know heading into tomorrow night's matchup and talk a little bit more about the IST. Want to let you know that tonight's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. David, let's start right at the top. We'll go out east and we'll start with the Philadelphia 76ers, who absolutely destroyed the Los Angeles Lakers 138-94. Joel Embiid in this game. I've seen a lot of great Embiid games. This goes to me on one of the lists of his most impressive in a regular season environment. 30 points, 11 rebounds, 11 assists on 9 of 15 shooting, 2 of 3 from 3, and 10 of 12 from the stripe. He did all this 30-11-11 in 30 minutes and 50 seconds. He absolutely left zero doubt on this court. He bodied Anthony Davis. He had some really impressive defensive plays. He wound up with one block and a steal, but played some really good defense. The Sixers bench was really who absolutely destroyed in their minutes, and they have all the plus minus stuff in there. I thought this, though, was a really impressive win by the Sixers, who jumped out to basically an 18-point lead early and never let up. They just kept – there was no fake comeback in this one. They dominated the Lakers from start to finish.
Yeah, they cut the lead to 12 at one point, and I'm thinking, oh, maybe Matt was right. There's going to be a little bit of a close here, maybe to make it interesting. But no, then they just kept hitting shot after shot. It was an impressive showing from Philadelphia, and completely different than how the first few minutes of the game were going when Embiid picked up 2 early fouls in the first 4 minutes of play, and you thought maybe he might be hindered. It looked like AD was taking the matchup against Embiid pretty personally. He was aggressive early on, and then, somewhat predictably tapered off a little bit throughout the course of the game. And Embiid just seemed to get stronger and stronger as the minutes went on. But it was just the outside shooting, just incredible performances from everybody. And, of course, Embiid and Maxey, with over 30 points apiece, really, really strong showing from the Sixers.
B-Ball Paul made comments before this game about defending Anthony Davis, about how we know he's going to flop, he's going to flail, which everybody rightfully responded on social media with this is Joel Embiid's teammate, which I was very amused by. I do want to get your thoughts. Who's a bigger flopper, Joel Embiid or Anthony Davis?
Oh, I don't know. I'm watching Miami face Philadelphia so many times. I guess I'm kind of leaning towards Embiid just because he's so big and he's so strong. There really shouldn't be anything or anyone on this in the league who could possibly knock him down. And yet the ease with which he does so, I had to say Joel.
Yeah, I think they're exactly equal. Both of them seem to have vertigo and can't stay upright. LeBron James was minus 30 in this game, despite going for 18 points on 8 of 12 shooting with 5 assists. No boards, by the way, for
0
LeBron.
rebounds. Yeah.
He had 18 points in 30 minutes of play, so like still would have finished with probably less than 25 here. They just had no other offense. This was a really impressive win for the Sixers. They cooked them with Tyrese Maxey coming around DHOs. They got really great contributions from the bench. Like Marcus Morris, of all people, went off for 16 points in this one on 6 of 8 shooting, 4 of 5 from 3. But like Nick Batum was a plus 30 in this game. His defense has been awesome. This was a really complete performance by the Sixers. On the other end of this, the Lakers haven't beaten anybody. Like, we're just going to have to be honest about this. Like, they just haven't beaten anybody. And I have like my numbers like them quite a bit when I'm doing projections on them. But ultimately, they like this is the problem is that they're only really good when they're facing teams that they can beat up on. And when they seem to go up against anybody with a pulse, it gets really dicey for the Lakers.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair summation. Their benches. I know they're going through some injuries and everything else like that, but there's some poor roster construction there. They haven't gotten great performances from Christian Wood and others that they thought might, provide a boost this season. And it just every time you see them kind of crumble against these much better teams, and you wonder, well, how much longer can LeBron? And he's being asked to do this at this stage of his career. How much longer can he carry this team? And he seems to be the measuring stick for how well this team can perform is counting on an older version of a really, really great player in order to do amazing things on a nightly basis. And that's kind of unfair. And so there really isn't just much around him in terms of stepping up. I know Austin Reeves has been mostly good, but his performances feel a little lackluster when you're counting on him to be a part of there's that big three. So I'm not really sure where you're going to get contributions. And after the game, LeBron James said, a lot needs to change about this team. He didn't specify as to what a lot means, but I'm not sure if there's a trade or anything else that he thinks might be able to boost something. But they're going to have to get some kind of production from somebody other than him and AD.
Just going to keep trading guys until they get the right combination. No Cam Reddish tonight. He's actually played really well for them. I want to give Cam a lot of credit. No Rui Hachimura, and that's more spacing. Like in this game, this does continue to be an issue for the Lakers where they just can't keep up against teams that can shoot the three. The Lakers were 7 of 28 from three-point range. The Sixers were 22 of 46. You're just not going to be able to keep pace, man, if you're, one, allowing that many more threes, and two, not taking that as many threes and allowing a high percentage. Like, think about that. 7 to 22. 22 to 7 is a 3-point advantage. Your efficiency is never going to be high enough. You mentioned Anthony Davis, 8 points in like the first 6 minutes and then 9 points the rest of the way. Like,
yeah.
At some point, I will continue to ask people to accurately assess Anthony Davis as to the level of superstar that people pretend that he is. I'm going to need to see him be a little bit more versus a team that's not missing like 4 centers or they completely overwhelm. I'm sure he'll have a dominant game versus, I don't know, like Charlotte or something coming up and everyone will get all excited. On the other side, we'll talk about some more of tonight's games, including the New Orleans Pelicans and the Indiana Pacers getting bit by the upset bug. We'll talk about that up next on Locked On NBA. Let's talk about FanDuel Sportsbook. As the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team just wins. All they got to do is win the game outright. I like the Houston Texans this weekend, -3. If we flip home field, that means that the Broncos would be favored at home. I'm still not buying the Broncos. I will never buy the Broncos, just how it's going to be. I also like Tampa Bay -6. They're taking on Carolina. Again, I like to do the home field flip. If you do 4.5 points on home field flip, which is about within range, this means that the Panthers would only be 1.5 point dogs at home. I've watched that offensive line and Bryce Young run around. It's not good, but you can just put in a money line bet and get $150 if your team wins in bonus bets. The app's so easy to use. You can bet spreads, player props, over unders. You can bet in-season tournament MVP. A lot of value to be found in that market currently, given that they only got to win 3 games. So make sure to find your team in the tournament and lock onto that one. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. We'll be right back on Locked On NBA. Back here on Locked On NBA. Thanks for joining us. David Ramil and Matt Moore with you here on a Tuesday. Hope your week is going great. Thanks for making us part of it. Elsewhere in the association tonight, the Indiana Pacers had a game where the game went under. They went like 14 in a row of games that went over the betting total. Got bit tonight versus, of all teams, the Portland Trailblazers. Portland's playing a little bit better. They're actually starting to come get it together like a little bit here, which I think is pretty promising. Scoot Henderson, by the way, in this one, 13 points on 4 of 10 shooting. Blazers get the win, 114-110 over the Pacers, despite Tyrese Halliburton's 33 points and 9 assists in this one on 11-17. The Pacers, though, 8 of 33 from 3. This happened to them versus Chicago, and that's not a great team either, but it does seem like when they face these teams with a lot of length, Indiana can sometimes have trouble if the 3-pointers don't drop. They don't have like a lot of other offense. Like they're just going to keep doing what they do. Jeremy Grant was great in this one, 34 points on 12 of 18 shooting. Brogdon added 24. I got to say, I had kind of written off the Blazers for dead, and I've kind of liked how they've played the last 2 weeks, David.
I'm a little surprised that they were able to win this game, though, with only 18 3-point attempts. That is pretty anemic, from the beyond the perimeter there. So despite that, but I guess they were trying to match Indiana bucket for bucket, and they were able to hold their own down the stretch. They got some good foul calls in their favor, and Indiana just was taking some rush shots towards the end there. They just didn't seem to have an answer. To your point, they just couldn't seem to really muster any sort of offense when those 3-point shots weren't falling. As far as Portland's overall approach is concerned, no one has high expectations for this team. So whatever they're able to do is as long as they're trending in the right direction, I think that's a positive overall takeaway for their season. And they did get a nice performance from DeAndre Ayton today, 22 points too. So overall, strong showing for them. But I think this was mostly Indiana losing this game and still kind of being exposed somewhat by a team that's not particularly good in Portland, but at least doing some nice things throughout the start of the season.
Speaking of losing games, let's go to the New Orleans Pelicans, who were on the road, had just lost to the Utah.
That was a perfect setup to talk about the Detroit Pistons. Losers of 14 straight. I know you don't really want to talk about that.
All right, let's get to it. They can't even beat the Wizards, man. They can't.
That is rough.
Find a Pistons fan in your life and hug them. Go to Locked On Pistons and leave a 5-star review out of pity. That's like where we're at this point, because it is miserable. And it's crazy for those of us that saw the Pistons in the mid 2000s who went to the conference finals every single year. This is a historic franchise, and it's a joke. And they can't score. They just cannot score. Cade had 26 tonight, but he was only 10 of 22 from the field. You had to take 22 shots. They can't get anything. Their offense is just so anemic. I'm not surprised the Wizards won this game. They do have guys that can actually put it together. They do have guys that can actually score. And then Jordan Poole, who goes 3 of 9 from the field and somehow still looks bad with a plus 10. But this really is kind of the dividing line, though, is look, there's the rest of the NBA. The bottom of it has the Wizards, and then there's the Pistons down here. And that's a bummer. That's just a bummer that this franchise is so lost that I don't know how you have hope here. It's basically, man, hopefully you can eventually draft someone who can score next to Cade and you can put enough shooting around him. But they've got bigs. They got Jalen Duren. They got Isaiah Stewart. I don't know how long this is going to go on. If they can't win this game, I don't know when they're going to win.
I don't either. And this is, they started off their season here in Miami, and I talked to Duren, and he's such a good kid, and he just was so optimistic, and there was a buzz and a vibe about that team, and they were so optimistic because it was obvious that, after Cade's strong off season, Duren working with Team USA, they were going to be on to something here, and they held Miami to a pretty tight game, but that was more indicative of Miami just really kind of struggling. Jimmy Butler having not played a single minute in the preseason, and I think that was pretty much how that played out. But overall, the Pistons were still pretty good to start the season, and then it kind of just exposes their youth a little bit. There's nobody on this team to say, enough is enough. We've got to turn things around and just sacrifice everything on any given night to inspire this team. There's nobody on this roster capable of doing that. And then you look at the overall roster construction, and you've got Cade Cunningham and a team that's not built correctly around him and can't maximize his incredible skills. Like, he's a really good player that nobody seems to even know exists because he plays for a really bad Detroit team. But that roster is just so poorly constructed, and it can't help what Cade does. And you've got Isaiah Stewart, great guy, really like him, and he's a useful player. He should not be your starting power forward. Like, he's a center, and he's an undersized one at that. He should probably be Duran's backup at this point in the season. I know he was starting basically at center, or no, he was playing alongside Marvin Bagley, who was filling in for Duran there too. But it's just, this roster, man, they just look broken. Like, I texted Koo, the host of Locked On Pistons, and he's so upset. He's having an existential crisis watching this team, but the team just looks broken. They just don't seem to have any answers. And this kind of, again, I think speaks to their overall youth and a team that's embraced losing too much over the last few seasons in order to go through that rebuilding process. And it's just, there's no way out right now. And it's a dark time over in Detroit.
Yeah. Elsewhere, Utah Jazz knocked out the Pelicans the other night. And usually if you're the underdog and you get that first one, the other team comes back and storms over you. Not this time. Jazz held off the New Orleans Pelicans. Pelicans made a furious comeback late in the fourth quarter, but were able to get the edge out win here. No Lauri Markkanen. They were starting someone you know very well. Omer Yurtseven starts for the Utah Jazz, and they get the win. Look, John Collins went 4 of 10 in this game. The Jazz shot 42% from the field in this game. And if you do the advanced stats, which are based on estimated possessions, which is why this is going to look funky, it was actually 118 to 119 in net rating. Like, the Jazz technically won this game with a negative net rating, according to NBA's metrics. That's how close it was, and really how wonky of a game it was. To me, a lot of this is Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson, I thought were great in this one, 9 of 16. They couldn't necessarily get the stops that they needed. The starters were fine for the Pelicans, but Dyson Daniels really struggled in some a certain rotation minutes. Herb Jones was okay. They just didn't have enough offense. Jordan Hawkins usually gives them a boost, but they lost those minutes on defense, so they weren't able to get the rotations right. I felt like, in part, the healthier that the Pelicans get, and they're going to get CJ McCollum back soon, and they're going to get Trey Jones back probably sometime in December. Like, this is a lot of guys for Willie Green to try and balance, because now Hawkins deserves to be in the rotation and Dyson Daniels deserves to be in the rotation. Both those guys struggled tonight. Maybe the veterans helped them in this game. But this was one where, again, I do kind of look at the overall team structure and just go, man, you guys got to get organized. This is one that you should, like, if you have intentions of making the playoffs, you win this game. Do
you feel that Ingram and Williamson can coexist like they did tonight? But then, as you mentioned, incorporating guys like McCollum and Jones back into the lineup once they're healthy, then that means somebody's minutes are going to get cut. Is a matter, how do you restructure that lineup, or is it more indicative of maybe a trade needs to happen in order for this team to reach their best version of themselves?
I will say this, is that I've seen some lobs from Ingram to Zion that I never saw in 3 years between those two. It's looked a lot better. Like, I am probably, this is a high point in my confidence in the Ingram Zion fit, and I've never been a believer. This is probably a little bit of a higher one. Like, I honestly kind of wonder, like, look, as much as I'm like, you win this game if you're a playoff team, if Trey Murphy plays, I think they win this game. So maybe the answer is just by function of CJ McCollum gives them competent offense for 25 minutes, 30 minutes a game, and Trey Murphy gives them everything that he does for 25, 30 minutes a game. And some of these other guys who are good, but maybe don't deserve to be in the rotation, they win those minutes by more, and everything kind of works itself out. Like, there's probably an 8-man that's fine here, and they're having to plug it in because they don't have anybody that really deserves all of those minutes. Like, Dyson Daniels played 23, and Najee Marshall played 27, and Jordan Hawkins played 25. When they get the full complement of guys back, it probably simplifies. Maybe that helps them, would probably be my read.
Yeah. Also, shout out to Keontae George. He hit some big shots down the stretch. He was a nice addition for them. So he's a good looking rookie. Yeah.
He's really good. On the other side, Tuesday features a whole slate, the last slate of the in-season tournament games. We'll try and break down what the tiebreakers are going to look like, who needs to win, who needs somebody else to win, what's it going to look like, how bad will the courts be, all that and more. We'll preview the last night of the in-season tournament when we return on Locked On NBA. Let's talk about PrizePicks, because PrizePicks, with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League, a league created specifically for combo projections that includes 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. You can put together LeBron James and Travis Kelce at a 10.5 combo of 3-pointers made and receptions. Get your LeBron X Taylor Swift entries in now. You've got quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types. That's what makes PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. We'll be right back on Locked On NBA. Final segment here on Locked On NBA. Thanks for joining us, making us part of your day. Matt Moore and David Ramil. You can catch David on Twitter. I'm supposed to call it X, but I call it Twitter, at DRamil13. I'm at HP Basketball, if you're so inclined. On Tuesday, the NBA wraps up the in-season tournament, whole slate of games. David, you asked me this about how much I like the tournament, and I said it was basically specifically programmed for me. I'm a sicko that likes weird new courts and strange jerseys and more intense regular season games. And there's a lot of things to bet on. So it's basically like if the NBA were to create a product in a lab for me, it would look like the in-season tournament. What have you thought about the in-season tournament as we wrap it up?
I like it. I really do. I think it's been a step in the right direction. I mean, there might be some tweaks here and there, and I think there's still a lot of ignorance about what the tournament represents and how much actual value it provides. But I think the players are buying in. They all see the money line at the possible end of this thing, and I think that's certainly a boost, probably a bigger one than a lot of people might have expected. You know, people say, "Oh, $500,000, it doesn't mean much to an NBA player." It means something to an NBA player. Even a guy like RJ Barrett, who's getting paid a lot of money. He just recently said, a chance to win $500,000 and go to Vegas. Who wouldn't want that? So I happen to agree with him, and I think everybody's played just a little bit more sharply in these games. I think they're taking it much more seriously than I had projected that they would, and I personally enjoy it. I just like watching it. And the courts, I think a lot of players have grumbled. It kind of reminds me of when they introduced the new ball a few years ago. I mean, it was probably more than a few years ago, but probably showing my age a little bit there. But, I think it's just going to take some time to get used to, and I think overall, they haven't been as bad as people. People just want to grumble about things on social media. That's just what it is. Like you could put a picture of a puppy, you'll get 9 people saying I hate dogs and dogs are stupid, etc. So you're not ever going to satisfy everybody. But as a product, the NBA continues to find ways of making regular season games more interesting, and I think the tournament has worked.
I agree. I have a post coming out on Action Network and the app on what's worked and what hasn't. The courts, my basic summation is, it was a good idea to try and visually make it different. They just went too far. And like next year they'll know, like, okay, maybe we just do the stripe down the middle, right? And new jerseys. Maybe we make like some slight variations. Just don't do the red courts. That really is, I think, the biggest thing. It's just like, don't do the red courts. Ban the red courts forever. I like all the other courts. I like the blue ones. I like the purple ones. The red ones got to go. Those are ones
They should do like a simple, like a brand, like, the in-season tournament, something that stands out, make it all different. Yeah. And I think that's works, it's a simplified process and makes it interesting when you can see all these different courts. And, when the court pictures first came out, everybody's kind of curious. And, I chastised them. I thought it was a little silly to see some of these versions of the court. But, you just want to do something that makes it different and makes it stand out to help people understand, oh, this has some additional implications to it. And I think in that sense, it does work, but they did go too far in a lot of cases.
All right. So there's a lot of scenarios up in the air on the last night of the tournament. And by a lot, I mean, I'm someone that obsesses over tiebreakers, and even my head is spinning trying to figure these out. To simplify a few things, the Kings play the Warriors in the last game of the night. If the Kings win, they're into the tournament. Okay. If they lose, they need Minnesota to win to create a 3-way tie, and then it'll depend on what the point differential is. Yeah. If you're a Warriors fan, you're looking for a win and the Wolves to lose to the Thunder, because then you win and have head-to-head over the Kings, and the Wolves can't tie you after the Wolves beat you. However, it's still possible for Golden State to get in technically if they win and the Wolves win if they win by more. So if you're a Warriors fan and you really want the Warriors into this thing, you want your team to win by a lot. It is an even tougher stretch for the Minnesota Timberwolves, who, oh boy, they get in with a Minnesota victory, a Sacramento loss, and they got to win tiebreaker. If you're wondering, like, well, what is tiebreaker, Matt? What does that mean? Okay. What they're looking at here is in group, the Wolves are down to the Kings by 32 points. So in order to get in, they need the Warriors to win by 20, which like drops Sacramento down to like 19. And then the Wolves got to win by 20 for them to get in. This is what I'm saying. I know your head's spinning here.
Yeah.
The biggest thing here is that we're going to probably see Jason Tatum. Actually, I want to ask you a question about that. I was going to ask you too. Tatum had comments about the point differential, and Boston needs to absolutely annihilate the Chicago Bulls tomorrow night. If they want to make the IST and have a shot at that 500,000, the Celtics are going to have to, like, whether Jason Tatum likes it or not, they're going to have to beat the brakes off the Chicago Bulls. But Jason Tatum said today that he doesn't like it, that he doesn't like the point differential being a tiebreaker, because you should have respect for your opponent and not be trying to score at the end of the games. I have my own thoughts. Do you have thoughts on this?
I think it's ridiculous. I think you're kind of grumbling about something there and trying to find some excuse to, again, you don't lose to the Orlando Magic. You don't have to worry about the point differential. And that's not a knock on the Magic, who've been really, really good, obviously. But I think that game kind of, set the Celtics back a little bit of their chances of being able to advance. So you've got to find ways. I mean, there's so many teams involved in this process. It's not just, it's not basic elimination here. I mean, with the exception of teams like the Pistons, who can't win a game, most teams are still with a realistic chance of being able to advance. And so you have to find a way of creating these tiebreakers. I don't have a problem with that. I'm not the extremist that says, well, if you don't want an opponent to score, then you better buckle down and play tighter defense. I mean, that's certainly a part of it. But, you're talking about it within the context of these games, adding up all the point differentials over the course of 3-4 games, it's a little bit more, difficult for a player to kind of try and maintain and manage. So, but I think he's just kind of picking at something that he doesn't necessarily a straw man argument, if you will.
I mean, I get it, just because I like the idea of, like, you should respect your opponent and not try and ride up on him. I get it. I do. The other thing I would say, though, is, like, look, technically speaking, if you go look at the NBA tiebreakers for playoff positioning, guess what the last tiebreaker is? Net points, point differential. That's the last one. Like, we use it, we just never get to it because we have other things that we can break down, from conference to division to common opponents. And all this basically is like you're already at common opponent, because that's the group play, right? And then you have tiebreakers for head to head. But if you wind up in a 3-way tie and you each beat each other, you got to play out somehow. And my question for Jason would be, would you rather 500,000 your chance at 500,000 be determined by a coin flip, or do you want control of that?
Right. I don't think teams necessarily run up the score either. Like, it's never been so blatant. Like, you have a team, like, look at tonight, the Sixers. It's not a tournament game. They just beat the brakes, to use your phrase, off the Lakers. They just had it going from long distance. I don't think they were trying to show them up. I don't think it was disrespectful to LeBron James or Anthony Davis or anything like that. They had those shots falling. What are you going to do? Not take them now? It's like, Tatum said we shouldn't. It's disrespectful. I think it's a little ridiculous. So I think if you can score and those shots fall, take them when you can. Why not?
A couple other scenarios to kind of like wrap this thing up. The Rockets get in if they beat the Mavericks. And I want you to envision for a second Dillon Brooks in-season tournament MVP. Just try and imagine Dillon Brooks in-season tournament MVP. Imagine that. Albert Şengün, by the way.
Did you put something on this? Did you place a little wager on Dillon Brooks?
I will say I bet Albert Şengün at 40-1. I did do that. If the Rockets lose to the Mavericks, the Pelicans get in. So that's how that works out. I will not break down the Eastern Conference because, good God Almighty, it is a mess. it is a mess in the Eastern Conference. Like there's no like, oh, if they win, they're in, or if they lose, if this other team loses, they're in. It's all tiebreakers. So we're going to see some absolutely bonker stuff. The Knicks, the Hawks, the Celtics, all of those teams need to win by a bajillion points. The Heat need to win by a bajillion points. Miami, now I will say Miami's is a little bit simpler because Miami gets in if they win and the Knicks lose. That's one scenario where they do get in. So if the Knicks lose to Charlotte, ... without LaMelo Ball, ... then the Heat can get in regardless of what else happens. I will ask you this though. I want to get your sense from this from a Heat culture standpoint.
Oh boy.
Is there any chance that the Heat try and pour it on for the tournament? It seems like the most antithetical Heat culture thing imaginable.
Like if they were able to advance, or in terms of like tomorrow's game, no, I really don't think. So much of it is driven by Jimmy, and he's such a hard character to figure out. I don't think he's inspired by this at all because it doesn't really mean anything. He doesn't want All-Star selections. He doesn't care about all NBA selections. He doesn't want any regular season recognition at all. The only thing missing from his career, his resume, is a championship. So that's all that really matters, and he is the straw that stirs the drink in Miami. So I think they just want to win, and they want to win every game. And they had a good chance of doing so if they had just been able to hang on to that 21-point lead against the Knicks this past Friday. It wouldn't have mattered, but that was not the case.
Is Jimmy still the straw that stirs the drink this season, or is it Bam?
It is Bam. It is Bam. It is Bam. Look, Jimmy still raises that ceiling, and this team goes as far as Jimmy can take them. But Bam is their best, most consistent player in that sense. He has been there, and when he misses games, Miami looks really bad because he does so much defensively, and he is a better player offensively as well.
That wrap it up for Locked On NBA. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate you guys being with us. Make sure to stick with us all week. Like I said, you got you got Jake Madison, John Corrales on Wednesday. You got Nick Angstadt and Pat the Designer on Thursday. And on Fridays, you got David's co-host, Wes Goldberg, who was on local TV in Miami, looking very sharp, by the way. And Adam Mares, my co-host over at Locked On Nuggets on Fridays. Make sure to keep it here. Make sure to check out youtube.com/LockedOnNBA. You can catch video versions of the show every single day, Monday through Friday. We'll see you guys again next week. Thanks for joining us here on Locked On NBA.